when you leave out of that job, you just get a headache. I was getting headaches. I thought I needed glasses. 10 years later, come to find out I did need glasses. But welcome to Debt Free in IT. I'm your host, Mike. This podcast is for anyone who's looking to get into the IT industry, whether it's for a career change or you're just interested. I think you come to the right place. So when it comes to any job, there will always be things that you love about that job, things that frustrate you about that job, and then some things that you wish you could change about that job. Well, in IT, it's no different. So in today's episode, we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in the IT industry. So let's get to it. So at first, I'd like to start with the good things in IT. So things that I like about IT. So basically, IT can be life-changing. So meaning that this is one of those industries that you can quickly get a high pay raise. Let's say, like for me, for instance, I went from working at Advanced Auto doing retail to getting in the IT industry. Then within a couple of years, like I said, you're able to move up. Now, hopefully, you move up faster than I did. So if you know my story, you know it took me a while to move up. But IT is one of those fields that I think could be very life-changing, especially if you're someone who maybe you didn't go to college, or maybe you took my route, you went to a community college. But basically, IT is one of those things, or maybe you're someone that just went out and got the certification, and then you landed your foot in the door, which going from whatever position you're going from into that industry could have been a pay raise just with that move. But then as you start moving up within the ranks, moving up to different positions, it ended up being a pretty hefty pay increase. So IT, in my eyes, like I said, it can be life-changing if you manage it right. And then also it can create financial freedom. So a lot of times I know plenty of people that work for a lot of companies, and a lot of times they get bonuses. So that's something I never experienced. So if you want to give me a bonus, somebody point me in the right direction. But basically, a lot of companies out here, they give bonuses, where I know some folks where, they may get a yearly bonus of at least 10 grand or more, or they may get a yearly bonus of 5 grand. So that bonus, you still get paid your regular paycheck too. So, and then they have all kind of investment opportunities. So this is somewhere where, let's say that you didn't get in the investment route, or you didn't start investing early. This is a field that you can get into where you can possibly get that big pay increase, to where now you can advance. You can now invest and try to make up for what you didn't do in the past. So IT can also create financial freedom. So this is one of those industries, as I talked about, like I said, you get a pretty hefty pay raise with most moves. Well, basically what this does is it allows you to get ahead. So far, a lot of us, we're in what they call the rat race, where, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm robbing this company here to pay off this bill over here. But IT is one of those things where, if you get that big pay raise, or if you end up moving your way to a big pay increase, it's one of those ways that you can start to get ahead. You can start working on paying off debt. Then once you pay off debt, you're working on investing more, things of that nature. So where a lot of companies even have a lot of investment opportunities that you could do. Some of them you work for may even have a stock, where, I would often say those companies with the ticker symbols. So like I said, they could have a ticker symbol where they give you a set price that you can buy that stock at. Let's say if the stock is trading at $25, they may say for all employees, you can buy this stock for $15. And then at the end of the year, you can sell that stock for whatever the price is currently. So let's say you bought 1,000 shares, and that's just small because I'm not really good at math. But like I said, let's say you bought 1,000 shares at that $15. Then at the end of the year, let's say that stock is trading at 50. So now you can sell those 1,000 shares at $50, which is a automatic pay increase. Which most folks, if you invest, though, a lot of times you want to hold it long term. But a lot of companies do offer this. And then as well as offering the stock options and allowing you to buy certain shares or whatever within the company, a lot of them also give bonuses. A lot of the publicly traded companies, I like to say, the ones that have that ticker symbol, a lot of times they may give pretty decent bonuses where, let's say at the end of the year, your bonus may be 10 grand for the year. That's on top of whatever you're still making. So this here allows you that chance to get ahead of the game. That's why I like to call it, working your way to get ahead of the game. Once you get ahead of the game, now you can start taking that extra money and then start investing it, which in long term ends up creating that financial freedom. And then another thing I like about IT is very versatile, meaning that anyone can get into IT. So you don't necessarily have to go get a degree, which that's also always helpful, but you see all kind of people from different walks of life get into IT. So some may have a degree, some may not have a degree, some may go get a certification, some may not go and get either. Some may just be working at a company and just so happen a help desk position opens up. They move to that help desk position. Then after that, they start moving their way up the ladder in the IT industry. So you got all walks of life that you can see here. So that's one thing I like about it. Like I say, I didn't necessarily have to go out and go get a 4-year degree or anything past that. I went and got a 2-year degree. But like I said, I know some of my colleagues and things like that where they didn't go and get no degrees. So it's one of the things where the playing field is there for everyone. The only thing is you get in what you put out of it. So if you putting in that work, a lot of times something good will come from it. So it's one of the things you get what you put in, or you get out of it what you put into it. But like I said, anyone can get into this industry, which is another point that I like about IT. And then the next thing I like about the IT industry is this is for all my people that got that entrepreneurial mindset, if I said that correctly. But this is for those folks. So once you get into IT, you start seeing a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities that come with it because once you get into it, let's say you learn this skill set. You could take that same skill set that you just learned and go out and start your own thing. If you're good at software development, you're coding, you're creating apps. Basically, if you're working in IT, let's say you work for a company, y'all create some kind of security app or something like that. Then basically, nothing's stopping you from going out on your own and starting that same thing. Now, if it's just you, this may take a while, but basically in the IT industry, this is where you start seeing different kind of opportunities. Where for me, before getting into the IT industry, the only business I really knew of that I would like to do was club promotions. You hear me talk about promoting parties and things like that. So, which was one of my side things I did years ago. But basically, when I got into the IT industry, I started learning about other opportunities. Like, okay, I never really knew behind the scenes of someone that owned a computer repair store. I never knew that. I used to think that, the only thing they're doing is repairing computers. When you look at the back end of it, a lot of times that local computer repair store have contracts with different businesses in the area to where they provide those businesses IT support, which in hand means that they're getting paid way more than just you coming in and they're fixing your PC, they're adding RAM and things like that. So once I got into it, I started seeing the back end. So this is where if you got the skill set in a high demand area, let's say you're doing something within the cloud, cybersecurity, a lot of times you can take that skill set and start your own thing, or maybe start your own thing and then hire out the talent for it. So, but this is one thing I like about the IT industry also is that you have opportunities, and you have a lot of opportunities once you get in and you learn the ins and out of tech. And then the last thing I like about the IT industry is, for the most part, it's not manual labor. So for me, like I said, I came from a job where I call it a mill. I like to, just my country accent. That's what I always call it, a mill. But basically, I came from a warehouse where we made car carpet. So the carpet that you have in your Honda Accord, your Acura, things like that, we made that car carpet. So basically, that was a job where I was working third shift. And like I said, third shift was rough. I was working third shift, coming in Sunday night, getting off Friday morning. Some days I may not even have that Friday night or Saturday night off. Sometimes we might have to work what you call 6 and 7 days. For some reason, a lot of people used to be glad to work 6, 7 days, but I was younger. So when I came in here at 6 and 7 days, it about brought tears to my eyes. I did not like 6 or 7 days. So But basically, I came from somewhere where even though this wasn't hard manual labor, but it was manual labor. It was manual labor where I had to look at the machines. I had to make sure they're running. If they break, I got to go and fix the machine or try to fix the machine or call to somebody over to fix the machine. And basically, the machines I'm running, they're basically running yarn, balls of yarn. So the yarn comes out smaller and smaller as it get to each machine, and eventually it goes to another department, and they wind it up on spools and things like that. So basically, this job would be considered a manual labor job. Now, it wasn't in a lumber yard, which is maybe more manual labor, but once I got into the IT industry, those days was long gone. So once I got into the industry, most of my jobs was basically sitting down, talking on the phone. Now, where I didn't have that manual labor, I did have that mental labor where, some days you're working on so many issues. When you leave out of that job, you just get a headache. I was getting headaches. I thought I needed glasses. 10 years later, come to find out I did need glasses. But basically, like I said, it wasn't manual labor. Most of my jobs were sitting down. Every once in a while, once I got in desktop, you're on the go, but still you're not doing nothing manual. And then in networking, you might have to go replace some equipment. But at the end of the day, it still beats that old school manual labor. So the next thing I would like to look at is the bad things in IT, or the things that I find frustrating or you might find frustrating. So one of the first things that comes to mind is when you're in this industry, a lot of times you're helping resolve problems. You're helping to fix issues, which in turn means that you're going to deal with all types of people. You're going to deal with technical people. You're going to deal with non-technical people. And basically dealing with those people, not everyone will understand what you do. So you're going to have those folks that you're trying to help them, but basically they're not going to want you to do your job where, from the IT standpoint, most of the time you have steps that you need to follow. You're going to go to some people that think they know more than you, but you got to fix their issue to where instead of you following those steps, they want to tell you, oh, I done did that. Not even letting you go through your little steps. I done did that too. So you're going to find those people. You're going to find some people, if you're working with a different company where there's an issue going on and you're supporting different companies, you're going to run into those folks that they're calling you, but basically they don't want you to do your troubleshooting. They want you to automatically have that answer. So you're working with those type of people. And then also you're going to work with the non-technical people. So the folks that, they may not even know how to turn on a computer. You're going to be working with all types of folks where, basically you're working with them. You're going to have to learn to be patient. And like I said, this is not overall a bad thing, but sometimes, like I said, depending on the personality that you end up dealing with, sometimes it may end up becoming very frustrating for you. So this is something that over time you just learn to be patient with. For me, I consider myself to be a pretty patient person. So usually after a while, say you get patient, and then, if you need somebody to vent to, you might can call up a coworker or talk to a coworker and vent, but you're going to come across those technical folks and then also those non-technical folks. And then the next thing that may be frustrating for some folks, like I said, is that you're always learning in this industry. So the learning never stops. So basically certifications, updates, new technologies, it isn't going to stop. It isn't going to stop no time soon. In a couple of years, it's only probably going to end up moving faster. So basically, you're always learning. So if you're in networking, you get that CCNA, learning ain't over there. Next thing you know, you need to up your skill set, maybe for a promotion or something, but you're studying the CCNP, even though it's going to make your job easier too. So, but then let's say some new technology come about and eventually you start working at a place that's implementing that technology. So you got to go out and learn that technology. Let's say it's something you need to roll out on the network. You got to learn whatever it is you're trying to roll out. You're going to pretty much have to learn it inside out to understand what it should do, what it may do, and what it may not do once it gets rolled out on your network. So basically, this is one of those games, one of those fields where technology is constantly changing. Like you said, now the big thing is AI. So everybody's, we're shifting, trying to learn how to use AI for the best use cases for AI. You even got some folks out there that's building AI agents. So AI is the next thing here. But like I said, 2 or 3 years from now, it's probably going to be on to something else. But like I said, the learning never stops in the IT industry. So this is something that, you have to get used to. And like I said, you're always learning. And then, like I said, this may not be frustrating for most folks. For me, usually if I got a use case, I'm cool with it. You know what I'm saying? There's never nothing bad for me because overall, when you look at it, it's actually making you more valuable because if you just stopped at wherever wherever you're at, then you'll never advance. So this is something that could be frustrating and it could be good. But one thing I know for sure is that learning never stops. The last thing that could be frustrating in the IT industry is at some point in your career, you will experience imposter syndrome. So this is no matter what point of your career, it could be entry level, you could be a veteran. You're going to have those moments where you question yourself. You're going to have those moments where, you come in one day and, everything you try to do fails. Everything you try to do fails. So it seems like you talking to y'all brainstorming some ideas, you throwing out stuff that's way to the left. You're going to have those days where you're going to ask yourself like, dang, do I really supposed to be here? We all have to have those things. So the imposter syndrome, it is something real. It's going to even sometimes where imposter syndrome, especially me in my earlier years is, well, sometimes now, because I'm not a big talker anyway, besides talking on here. But like I said, sometimes with imposter syndrome, it makes it to where, if you're in a group setting in a meeting and there's an issue or something coming up where you may not want to give your input on it, where you may know the clear answer or something like that, but that imposter syndrome in your mind makes you think that, nah, well, what I'm about to say is it's going to be wrong or it's going to be totally off topic. So you end up not saying nothing. So this is something, like I said, that's frustrating within the industry because this is something that everybody goes through. I went through it. Sometimes I still go through it. Other folks out there, you hear a lot of people talk about how this is something that you go through because in this industry, you're going to come upon situations you never seen before, so how can you figure it out, things like that, trying to work around how to resolve it, things like that. You're always going to second guess yourself. Quick pause. I'd like to introduce you to the Log Files. The Log Files is a weekly newsletter to help you start your IT career with practical advice and tips powered by yours truly. I launched it in the beginning of the year. It's packed with actionable advice, resources, and insights to kickstart your IT journey. The link is in the description as well as pinned in the comments. So don't miss out. Now back to the episode. So the last thing I want to look at is the ugly side of IT or things that I wish would change. The very first thing on my list is those entry-level struggles. So for most folks, getting your first job is the hardest step. For many entry-level roles, a lot of times we see them now where it's an entry-level role, but they want 4 years of experience. A lot of times it ain't making sense. Like make it make sense. Like, Sway, you ain't got the answer, Sway. This is what you see. Those entry-level roles a lot of times doesn't seem like they are very entry-level. So this is something that was the case when I was coming around, when I was trying to get a job. This was something that back then, and like I said, the industry still haven't caught up to where I don't think they're putting out truly entry-level roles. So this is something that, it needs to change in my eyes. Like I said, for most folks, that getting that first job is always the hardest. For me, it took roughly 3 years. The reason I say 3 years because I clearly remember my CCNA was about to expire a couple of months after I got hired. So once I got that CCNA the first time, I never renewed it. So it had to be roughly about 3 years before I landed my first IT role. Now, before then, I had some technical support, but it didn't last long because it was in a call center. But basically, I consider my first role was when I got on at the hospital, which was where I was then in the IT industry, in the IT department at that hospital. So, but like I said, one of the things I would like to see change is entry-level roles clearly becoming entry-level roles. And then another thing, since we're on the topic of jobs, I would like to see change is, put the pay range on there. You know what I'm saying? That way you ain't got to waste your time. If you see the job and you say, oh, that's not within my pay range, you ain't got to worry about applying. But that's another topic for another day. So the next thing that's bad in IT that I would like to see change is a lot of times you may end up in a toxic environment within the IT industry. So you have some workplaces where, you may end up on a team where you're with all veterans and basically they're not trying to help you learn anything. They're basically keeping in all the information. You have some people that they think that, oh, if I tell this person the information or how to resolve this or how to do this, then I'm not going to have a job. So you're going to have those situations to where, you might come across that some point in time in your career. And then also you might come across bad leadership. This could be either your manager or this could be the department in general where, things just ain't up to par. Things don't seem kind of fair. So you see this where a lot of times, like I said, most places try to have something in place to prevent this, but you're always going to run across this gatekeeping and things like that. So it's even to the point where as I got more skilled, one of the things I started looking for, especially when I'm going in interviews and things like that, or I'm looking at moving departments, one of the things I look at and that is high up on my list that decides whether or not I'm going to apply for a job or something like that is I look at the team. If it's somewhere where I'm already at that particular company and I'm trying to move to another department, I analyze who's on that team. Because one of the things in my mind is, okay, I know that I'm going in this position and I'm entry level in this position. I don't know everything. I'm looking at, is there anyone I can learn from on this team? So I'm looking at that. Now, if it's somewhere where I don't see anyone I can learn from or everyone on the team I've interacted with has a bad attitude, then basically that's going to cause me to not apply for that particular role. So now if it's a company, an outside company, and I don't know no better yet, I'm going to see if I know anyone that works there. I'm going to look online, look at the reviews. And then basically once I go into the interview, a lot of times one of your interviews, and especially on the IT side of things, one of your interviews may end up being with the team that you will be on. So this is where, as they're questioning me, I'm analyzing them too, buddy. I'm seeing what type of person you are. I'm asking myself, is there someone I can learn from? Because one of the things that I think helped me out in every career move that I went to within the IT industry was every team I got on, there was one person at least. Most of the time, it was multiple people that I could learn from because they knew I was just coming into it. It was always somebody I could tag along with. I did it in desktop. There was someone that was already there who was a veteran. You know what I'm saying? I tagged along with them, seeing how they fixed issues, and that's how I learned the majority of the things I learned. Then when I got in networking, I did the same thing there where, every team member, if they went out working on something, my first couple of months there, I'm shoulder surfing. I'm watching them fix issues. I'm taking notes. That way I started seeing that issue. At first I may hesitate to fix it. Then after a while you fix it and you see that it resolves that issue. Next thing you know, you start getting more confident in yourself. And then, you start fixing issues on your own. And then, like I said, after that, you're off to the races. So that's one of the things I always look at. Is there someone on this team that I can learn from? Then the next thing I wish that could change within the industry is a lot of times we all know as veterans, especially that most of the time, if you want to get big pay increases, you got to job hop. Where most people, they work in a company maybe 1 to 3 years, 1 to 4 years. And then basically if they're out to get that bag, if they're out to get the most money as possible, a lot of times this person will leave jobs because a lot of times most companies have a bigger salary or whatever to pull talent from outside in rather than promoting talent that's already there up. So this is something I would like to see change because most of the time, you may be at a pretty decent company but things may get tight to where, I need some more pay. Some people may say, if you need more pay, you need to learn how to manage your money. But these days of time, man, you actually need more pay. So with the cost of living, you actually end up needing more pay. So this may be something where, I'm at a good company, but hey, things getting tight. I'm at the home making bologna sandwiches, frying bologna, eating Viennas. I'm doing that. I'm cooking up some sausage meat and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So one of the things where you may actually end up just needing more money. So, but in this case, that job you at may not be able to give you a pay raise or anything like that to keep you. So you end up leaving, going somewhere else in order to get that pay raise. And then sometimes you may end up somewhere where you don't really like it, but you like the money. So like I said, this is something I would like to see change to where IT professionals don't necessarily have to keep job hopping in order to get a decent income in order to meet the cost of living. And then another thing I would like to see change within the industry is outsourcing and layoffs. So a lot of times companies, especially the larger companies, sometimes they make sudden cuts, to where even, the most talented people end up losing their jobs. This is something that I would like to see change also. Most companies, like I said, you see it all the time pop up every couple of weeks, every couple of months. There's always some company laying off. To me, I have a theory about it. In my mind, I always think that it seems like to me, most companies start laying off when it's time for their earnings. If you look at the stock market or if you follow the stock market. And to me, it always seems like when it's time for that company earnings is about to come up, seems like they start doing layoffs. But this is something I would like to see change. And then some companies, like I say, if they're not doing a layoff, they may start outsourcing all of their positions overseas, which and then causes a mess in itself because you're bringing in someone from overseas that don't really know the people at that particular company, to where the users at that company, they got used to those personalities that's there. You got people that know each other, which in turn makes things flow better to now you bringing in someone overseas who's not going to have that personality. When they come in overseas, the only thing they looking for is resolve the issue. If it's not an issue they resolve, they tell you quit. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to try to look at it. They're basically going to tell you that's not my issue. But I don't do that. Basically, you leaving the user frustrated, which in turn makes other users frustrated. So it just ends up a bit mess. But this is something I would like to see change within the IT industry. So that brings me to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found some value in this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you can follow me at DebtFreeinIT. If you have any questions, you can email me at debtfreeinit@gmail.com, or you can visit me at debtfreeinitwithmike.com. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Peace.